So as I alluded to previously, I want to talk about RuneScape. I want to talk about old school RuneScape and why I don't like the game anymore. By sort of discussing what made me like the game in the first place and what's changed to change my mind about it. And I'm doing this for mostly selfish reasons. I'm a bit sick of having these sorts of thoughts run through my head again and again and again, and thinking to myself, I should go out and say them sometime. Put in the effort and actually say things. And so I'm hoping this will be slightly therapeutic in that way. I also think that there's just not too much in the way of sort of objective criticism of the game, even though this is going to be anything but objective. It's going to be my viewpoints, but maybe there's just a almost complete lack of criticism about the game. People who play it like it. It's a pretty simple sort of system. But I'm playing it right now, and I don't like it, and so I would like to discuss my reasons why. So, at the launch of Old School, they had a chance to create something different. They had a chance to branch out and not just follow the same sort of path that the live game took. And in my opinion, they fucked that up monumentally. They chose to focus on the RuneScape part of the title rather than on the old school part of the title. It could have been a pretty unique MMO in today's market, even though it already pretty is unique. It could have been so much more. It had the existing backbone of hundreds of thousands of players. It was the ideal startup for something that could have been interesting. But in the end, business decisions won out, and even though the launch poll didn't get enough votes for a dev team, they gave it one anyway. And the community-run polling idea was, fantastic in spirit. But at least for me, it quite clearly failed in its execution. And I believe that the reason for that is the general disregard for the tone of the game and the heavy push for modernization within the game. Because for a game called Old School RuneScape, there are a shocking amount of updates that push accessibility and ease of use. Convenience began to trump immersion in almost every single update. World building died out in favor of simplicity and just laziness. It used to be a game where multiple aspects were annoying, they were difficult, and honestly just straight up time consuming. The menus were restrictive, the interface was quite poor and didn't provide all the information you might have wanted. Teleports were to limited locations. NPCs were uncooperative with the player. Skills leveled up and gained XP at wildly different rates. And you could say that I just listed off a big bunch of negatives that there were in the game at launch. But for me, this all added to the game and to the world. I never really played much RuneScape past around 2006 sort of time. And so I think that this gives me a slightly, I don't know if I want to say unique, slightly different objective view on how it could end up being. I didn't have those preconceived notions of what could be in the game and what was in the game. I didn't think, I enjoyed summoning, let's put summoning in the game. Because I honestly still have no idea how summoning works. I came into the game as somebody who had played a bunch of other old school RPGs, because that's what I spent my time doing in my youth. And one game I'd like to compare early old school to is Morrowind, which is another game that I've played quite a lot of. And while the two games may seem fairly opposite in their tone, and one's single player, one's multiplayer. One's a trip out in a bizarre dreamscape, and the other is a basic Arthurian lore universe. They're still very similar games in spirit. Both of them took a lot of their inspirations from old D&D ideas. Sword and sorcery universes, mostly black and white sort of moralities, the dice roll combat system, and probably most importantly of all, the relative unimportance of the main character. The main character was just another person on an adventure in the world. And later Elder Scrolls games also shat on this idea, but it's not the point I'm trying to make here. The point I am going for is that neither of them being Morrowind and Old School RuneScape, tried to make it easy for the player to do things. And the two sort of key areas of this were movement around the world and the presentation of information. And I feel like they were particular strengths. Like, these are the sorts of things that people go back to Morrowind and they praise it for. And yet when people come in to play Old School RuneScape, these are the things that people push out of the game through the voting system. And I don't like that. So with movement, the two games shared a lot in common in terms of how you move around the world. Running stamina is limited, and you can increase how long you can run by training a skill, but if you run out of energy, you either need supplies to increase it again, or you just walk to your destination, no matter how far away it is. Objects and locations around the world were placed in a way that made them fit with the world rather than fit with the player. And this is especially seen in how the transportation system worked. In Morrowind, you had the Stilt Striders, the boats, and the Mages Guild teleportation, acting as sort of the major highways between the big cities, and they all had very distinct and canonical reasons for existing. The Stilt Striders took you to places that people in the world would want to go. The boats took you to places that were near the sea. The Mages Guild teleports took you to places where there were Mages Guilds. And even that messed up bloody Propylon teleport that nobody really ever uses took you to those old Dunmer strongholds that were scattered around the place. And what was important about this was that all those methods of getting around had reasons for being. And this was mostly true in Old School at launch. The teleports took you to most, not all, but most of the major cities around the world. The boats took you to coastal locations. Certain jewelries took you to locations with shared commonalities, the dueling ring, the games necklace sort of thing. They took you to places that shared things in common. The only real exception to this was fairy rings. Although in their defense, they were placed just kind of randomly around the world rather than directly next to resources or anything, so they get a bit of a free pass there. Just where everything was placed in the world made sense within the world. Trees and rocks and everything were just kind of dotted down in random places. But I think right now we've got a poll to move a rock near the fairy ring next to Ardoin, because people don't like the fact that their character has to run 3 extra tiles around a tree or something to get to the fairy ring because they're just too fucking lazy. They need teleports to the places that they want to go to right now. There's no longer that sort of that feeling of going somewhere away from the main centers of the world, because everything that the player might want to access just happens to have a teleport right next to it. And Slayer is the poster boy for this idea. The sort of original feeling for Slayer was that you would journey out into the world and go to some far out places to slay some fantastical beasts. But now you just press your teleport button and you're in the same room as them. The Slayer Cave was a massive fuck up when it was originally introduced. Grouping everything into little rooms made no sense. The monsters being within the cave itself barely made any sense. Neve assigning smoke devils when she couldn't assign dark beasts made no sense. And while these issues have been solved to varying degrees, they still haven't been handled well. Instead of removing smoke devils from Neve's table, they just gave her dark beasts, which doesn't make any sense. And to fix the whole thing with everybody being in the same cave, they moved all the monsters outside and put them into places that weren't as easy to access, and that made more sense. But the community didn't like that. They cried out for teleports to these new places, and they were actually fucking given the teleports, which boggles my mind. I don't understand it. It ruined the whole point of the update in the first place. It was put in there to decentralize Slayer and spread things out and create more variation between tasks, but that's not what people wanted, so instead they just got teleports right next to everything. And achievement diaries are the other sort of issue around that, but I'll get into them a bit later. Because the other major tonal issue that I have with the game is in the presentation of information, which is also something that is shared with Morrowind. Morrowind is an annoying ass game to play. The inventory screen is inconvenient. The map presents limited information. There is a pretty massive overload of stats that get just dumped on you right at the start, and you have no idea what any of them mean. The quest journal is quite literally a quest journal. It's just that it's a written word. And the game as a whole is honestly quite off-putting from a modern perspective when you first play it. But that's one of the major strengths of it. It's something that it shares with Old School. The inventory system of Old School is very restrictive. Swapping between UI elements takes time and prevents the user from seeing things that go on other screens. The map is quite localized. It shows a fairly limited area, and it encourages exploration. And the quest journal is, like in Morrowind, it's quite literally just a journal. And all these things, while they might not be the easiest to use, what they do is they reward the player for getting better at using them. Almost all of the important variables in Old School were, at the start of the game, housed in different parts of the user interface. If you wanted to know what your run energy was, you had to go down to the settings tab. If you wanted to know what your HP was or what your potion buffs were, you'd go to the stats tab. And if you wanted to know what your special attack was, you had to go to your combat tab. If you wanted to know which prayers you had active or you wanted to change your prayers, you had to go to the prayer tab. If you wanted to see your supplies or use a supply, you had to go to your inventory tab. And it created a certain sort of skill progression within the game. And this is a game that is extremely limited in skill progression. But that was just too hard. And while a lot of these issues have actually been solved by third-party clients rather than the main client, fuck third-party clients, by the way. I don't think anybody should be allowed to use them. The game did implement the likes of the orbs, and these removed the advantage that the player with more knowledge had. They've kept the quest journal largely the same, which is I'm hugely appreciative of. The map, this map is still the same, but I feel like they really missed a trick with the world map in itself. Because with the world map in the state that it is right now, you load up the game for the first ever time, you open it, and you can see everything. I wouldn't have minded areas that you hadn't seen yet being covered by some kind of smoke or fog of war, because there's just no sense of exploration there. Someone who logs into the game for the first time can immediately see what's everywhere else around the world, and that's just not right, in my opinion. And this is basically where my comparisons with Morrowind stop, because After all, old school RuneScape is an online game, not a single-player game. Interacting with other players should play a major part in it, but sadly, Jagex, fueled by the desires of the community, decided to, in one single move, remove the single largest aspect of player interaction in the game by bringing in the Grand Exchange. I maintain to this day that introducing the GE was the best decision for the game commercially that they had made. But at the same time, it was the worst decision for the game in terms of the spirit of the game that they had made. To put it quite bluntly, the GE killed trading. It is without a doubt my least favourite update to ever come to the game, and I personally divide the game and its players into pre-GE and post-GE. I always felt that it was a pretty fantastic stroke of luck that the archived version of Old School just so happened to be the one right before the Grand Exchange. And what this meant was that something that was so intrinsically old school, player-to-player trading, was kept alive. It meant that the devs had a chance to keep the interactiveness and the run-on effects of non-instantaneous trading alive. Simply leaving trading as it was initially would have, in my opinion, been the best possible path. The players themselves came up with a solution to the issue of trading. For all the hate Zybears gets, it was a pretty fantastic system. It was just so gloriously flawed and messed up. The introduction of verified accounts was probably something that it did need to keep it alive, but again, it was a player-driven initiative. The players themselves created this emergent system that allowed them to easily contact and trade each other, and that was the old school way. It was resourcefulness. Starting out the game when you first played was rough in terms of trading. World 1 was there, and it was a glorious clusterfuck, and it would swallow any new player alive. If they were lucky, they might eventually learn about Zybears, but even then there was a barrier in terms of the quantities of what you needed to buy and sell, and of the speed of the transactions. And the fact that a trade took significant investment meant that the trade in and of itself had to be more valuable to both players than trades are today. Contact needed to be initiated by one of the players. Agreement needed to be reached about the prices and the quantities. Agreement needed to be reached about the location that the trade would take place. And these things became bartering chips in their own rights within the trade. Not needing to initiate contact with someone meant you had to expend less effort. Offering to go to someone else's world on location could, earn you their favor. It could get you a more desirable trade. Refusing to do that could lose you a trade outright. Repeating trades with the same person could, create a report that would lead to you being supplied more, or you being given better prices. And Herbler and Crafting were the two amazing examples of this. Every single player, when getting their levels and XP in those two skills, faced a serious trial. First, they needed to secure the resources, and this meant finding someone who was willing to sell you a significant enough quantity at an acceptable price. And then if you couldn't find the right items that you initially wanted, you might have had to settle for something else. Niche items required the user to put more effort into finding a supplier, and these niche items would have given more benefit as a result. And then once you created the product, you needed to find someone who wanted to buy them, and who wanted to buy them in either a great enough quantity or at a reliable enough pace that you could keep up enough capital to continue buying more resources. I remember when I was doing the two skills, I had a guy for things. I had a guy that supplied me with certain items. I remember after I finished crafting, the guy had been tanning dragon leathers for me. He was still PMing me about a month later asking if I still wanted to buy new leathers. I had a couple of guys who exclusively sold me all of the herbs that they were farming. I had a guy who spent his time, for all I know, doing nothing but gathering Mortmeyer fungus so that he could sell it to me. And then when I didn't need any more Mortmeyer fungus, he got really upset with me because he'd gone out and he'd gathered too much. Now he needed to create new contacts, and he needed to find a new buyer. And then when I finished Herblore, I was faced with a choice of either selling all of my potions at a slow pace, basically one by one, or I could take up the offer of a nice user by the name of Potshot2. And what this would have involved was selling all of my potions to him in one trade at a hugely discounted price. And all of this just made the economy feel so alive. There were inconveniences, but you dealt with it. Now you just walk up to the GE and you press the buy button and you press the sell button, and if the buy limit stops you from buying it, you either go and beg to Jagex about increasing the buy limit, or you just log into your alternate account and just get around that system because it doesn't matter to you because you're better than that. I was always a huge supporter of the trading post as the other alternative. I thought that it was a fantastic update that could have worked very well as a trading solution with a couple of small tweaks, particularly offers appearing or not appearing if the user was either offline or appearing offline. But since so much of the community already knew about the GE and how easy it would be, they just stifled the trading post. They shat on it and they demanded something else. And this was a huge missed opportunity. They had the chance to, as I said earlier, to branch out the game and really bring out the old school part of it. This is also where I feel Mod Ash has his failing. He makes good content, but who gives a shit what that content means for the game as long as it works, is his sort of attitude. Good on him for making a functional Grand Exchange, but bad on him for making the Grand Exchange is my sort of view on it. And my problem with the GE isn't even just the loss of player interaction, but the loss of the trades having any value. In the past, quantity was king. If you had enough of something, or if you were willing to buy enough of something, you dictated the terms. Magic seeds in bulk were a great example of this. You used to have merchants who would buy them in small numbers from woodcutters or whoever else was getting the magic seeds, and then they would sell them on to farmers for exorbitant rates to people who were wanting to plant them. Players were willing to buy large amounts of, or players who were willing to buy large amounts of potions could easily demand lower prices. Everybody who crafted nats back in the day could tell a staggering number of stories about people trying to buy 20 at a time and getting refused, or offering to buy a couple 100,000 at a time, and you just kind of said, "Oh, okay, I'll sell them for less." And it just sort of this grudging acceptance because you wanted to move the quantity. You wanted to sell things with that sort of convenience. And then the GE came out, and suddenly every item had value without quantity. Bank sales probably don't exist anymore, but the idea of that was that people wanted to get rid of the useless junk in their bank that they thought might have had value. But now people just walk up and press the GE button and they sell their 4 uncut jades that they can't remember where they got it from, or their 15,000 maple logs from Kingdom. Maple logs in particular crashed massively when the GE came out, as everyone just figured, hey, I don't need these anymore, may as well sell them. Players could go and mine a single inventory of iron and just walk up to the GE and sell them for this sort of instant gratification. There was no working for things, and the whole landscape around what RuneScape players call merching also died basically overnight. No longer was it about spending a significant amount of time building up contacts to gather supplies in bulk, and then building up contacts to sell them on for a higher price, which was something that took time and it took effort, and that provided a valuable service to both suppliers and consumers. Now you just go onto the GE and you skim a little bit off the top, and you provide no actual benefit to the game other than a tiny little bit of market solvency. And it's a real shame that things like that are gone. And in the end, the GE came into the game because players wanted a modern experience. No one wants to play some shitty old game where you can't sell things easily. All of the new games on the market have simple trading systems, so old school should have it too. And there's just this attitude of wanting to modernize the game that pisses me off more than anything else. Why in the ever-loving fuck would you play a game called old school RuneScape and look for a modern experience in it? You should just go fuck off and play your own stupid little modern MMO rather than ruining the one that I already enjoy. Because I did enjoy it. It's something that I genuinely loved. I remember arguing about this idea ages ago with a few people. The idea of leaving something like it is in favour of updating it to suit other people. Sathon in particular used to really rile me up about it. I remember a fair few heated arguments with him in the CC about it. I do miss that boy. And I'm obviously going to be selfish now with these C things, so from my view, keeping something existing that somebody already enjoys should take priority over ruining that in favour of something that someone else enjoys. It's an I was here first type mentality. I don't want a modern MMO. I hate modern MMOs. And this all ends up coming down to, as I said before, commercial decisions. I'd love to see what the timeline is like in a world where Jagex didn't assign the dev team to old school and instead just left it with a couple of people for upkeep. It would make them less money, yeah, but I think it would be a better game. And people hate this train of thought. A prevailing attitude lately has been that more players equals more money, which equals more updates, which equals a better game. And it's really shone through with this recent mobile announcement. Anyone expressing distaste for the mobile announcement was quickly rebuked and had their opinions fixed by the Jagex Internet Defense Force with shouts of, but we get more players. And I've got to say, more players is just about the last thing that I want in this game. Early to mid 2014 was the prime of old school for me. The stupid ass update count was basically limited to Nightmare Zone and Motherload. The player base was dedicated, and the people who were there still generally wanted to play the game. They wanted to play the product in front of them. But no, as it turns out, I shouldn't want that. I, as a consumer, should want Jagex to make more money. And this sort of attitude being levelled towards the mobile update disgusts me. I'm not playing the damn game so that Jagex can increase their revenue stream. I'm playing it so I can enjoy myself. Mobile is not the problem with the game. Mobile is a symptom of the problem with the game. And the problem is that people, for some bizarre reason, don't want old school RuneScape to remain old school. And a mobile client is just about as far away from preserving that old school feel as possible. And talking about commercially driven decisions brings my probably third least favourite update, if you can call it an update, to the table. That being where Jagex decided to let players play on more than one account at a time, all so that they could make more money. Because back in yonder years, the idea of multi-boxing in RuneScape was hugely frowned upon. It was against the rules outright. And I think that having the single account that you played tied very heavily into the old school idea of role-playing a character that formed such a vital part of the game. I love looking at accounts and being able to follow their story, to look at them and see that they trained this skill before that skill so that they can make money, that they trained this skill last because it was pure loss and that they didn't sell anything afterward, or that they trained this skill because it didn't require time investment to make money. And even though it's less XP than other skills, it might end up being more valuable in the overall XP race because they didn't need to go out and make money for it. But now you look at the front page and you don't see any of that. The only tale that accounts on the front page now tell is one of spending a lot of money that has no source and spending time sitting in Nightmare Zone. It's like the tax fraud of the high scores world. They've just got all this GP and all this combat XP that seems to have come from nowhere. I mean, I've already said my bit on alts in another video, I'm pretty sure. I think it was one of the ones where I was making astrals, but I just quite simply do not agree with anybody who uses them, and I just think it's massively against the spirit of the game. And this is where I poorly segue into, as I mentioned earlier, my distaste for the community, both the voting public and the high-level players, because I don't particularly like either of them. And this is all based around two central sort of threads, narrative threads, I suppose, that seem to carry through the majority of opinion. Those being entitlement and what I've decided to call vanity. There's just been this increase in the desire to appear to have something or to get the benefits of something without having to work for it. And this is where I'm going to bring up achievement diaries, and I really, really hate achievement diaries for those sorts of reasons. At a conceptual level, they're brilliant. A log of small achievements that show a player's progress through equipable items with some minor benefits. But in reality, achievement diaries became benchmarks that players put huge emphasis on obtaining and felt like they deserved a huge reward for obtaining. Updates were brought out to make the skills easier to train, while at the same time the rewards themselves gained from the diaries were made even better and even stronger. And the idea of making something less difficult but give more reward absolutely baffles me. It just makes no sense. No, I do not think any achievement diary has had a significant update to it that has made it more difficult since launch. But every single achievement diary has had a significant update to it, mostly through gameplay updates to make it easier to achieve, and probably every single achievement diary, I can't bother checking, has had updates made to it that give it better rewards. And how does that work? It's just the complete and utter opposite of game balance. It becomes this benchmark where players and developers both say, oh, well, this player is at this point, therefore they deserve to have this, discounting the inherent benefits that exist to progressing within the game in and of itself. And skill cape perks are the other major culprit of this I'd like to bring up, increasing the benefit of something that is only increasingly becoming easier to gain in the first place. Because people seem to have it in their heads that they need a reason to get a 99 in a skill, that because they got 99 in a skill, they deserve to have certain benefits. Don't even get me fucking started on the maxscape. Anybody who honestly likes the maxscape is an absolute fuckwit, and I hope that I never have to interact with you in any capacity. But back where I was, getting a 99 in itself should be the reward, Getting 99 attack means that you hit more accurately than people with 98. Getting 99 defense means that you take less damage than people with 98. Getting 99 prayer means you have one more prayer point than someone with 98. Getting 99 fishing or mining means that you gather resources faster than someone with 98. But that's not good enough. Instead, apparently, according to this community, getting 99 in a skill should have a massive spike in natural XP rates by giving you double rocks, or it should provide you with unlimited teleports to a place that was previously pretty far out of the way. And then, God forbid, you go out and get 99 in all skills. Instead of that being a personal achievement that you can look at and say, I achieved this and I'm proud of. It should instead just make you god of all creation and become the biggest Swiss Army knife in the entire game. Because, basically put, people want the game to be about them, the player. I think I ranted about this on a podcast ages ago, where people were supporting the idea of farming NPCs standing still so that the player could talk to them quicker and easier with less convenience, without even stopping to think about the immersion of the world, about how these NPCs would now be stuck in a single tile without the ability to stretch their legs, and the completely indifferent attitude of the voting public towards those sorts of things helps fuel the entitlement of a subset of players. Most people don't give a shit about what the updates are. They just press the yes button because more updates equals good. And so when a bunch of uppity little fucks sit around begging and harassing JMods, begging for little fixes or additions to things because that they're just a bit too annoying, or they take a bit too much time, or they feel like they deserve them now, people will just vote yes. And selfish voting is fine. I have no problem with selfish voting. That's how democracy works. But selfish voting doesn't work when they poll such retarded shit all of the time. And then on the more personal side of things, I don't like RuneScape players. I'd been telling myself for quite a while now that the reason I was sticking around was that I liked some aspects of the community. But as time's gone on, I just began to it just became more difficult to see those aspects. The high levels in particular became increasingly unpleasant. I've never really been a person to talk to people. I could probably count the number of people I've had a decent one-on-one conversation with within this community on probably one hand, maybe two. But my desire to talk to these people calling themselves high-level players has just basically disappeared entirely recently. All of their opinions about RuneScape suck because they don't match up with mine. And there's just this constant dick waving and compensating that goes on. Trying to talk to someone who solely prides their entire life on the amount of hours they've spent playing RuneScape in the last week is just fucking tiring. And I generally try to avoid talking to people if they're talking about RuneScape for that sort of reason. And I've always been a big fan, a big supporter of the idea that you should try to leave things in a better state than what you found them. And that's just really hard in this community, because if there was any influence that I ever had on the community that I'd hoped could sort of stick around, it would have been my extensive no bullying and no rude words campaigns that I undertook early on in my stint. But see, people just seem to be insistent on being unpleasant to each other. It's not even like the language or anything, it's just the intent behind it. These games where progress is measured solely or almost solely in playtime quite often seem to have this sort of problem where people just get so hung up on the game and begin to feel that they're not only a better player but a better person than someone just because they have a higher number than them. And this is coming from someone who has a pretty damn high number, but that number has come about mostly through a genuine love for the game and a bit of lack of desire to do anything else in my life. I've never been a competitive person, never been that sort of type A personality. And as time has gone on, it feels like the people like me have either gotten drowned out or just gotten sick of the game, and a larger proportion of the players are that competitive type A personality. The people who want to complete things with the purpose of beating someone. And I don't mind people like that in small doses. Everyone's different, you need variety, but when the entire narrative of a community starts to boil down to people arguing about whose friends play more RuneScape, I just can't be bothered anymore. I guess not being bothered sort of sums up my whole view towards the game these days. I just want to finish what I started and go. I couldn't give two shits about the game, quote unquote, growing. I've sat here watching it grow, and unfortunately, it's grown into something that I don't like. It's become something that I don't particularly enjoy, and it's become something that I don't even want to support financially. I'm not even sure what comes next either, because I've pretty effectively fucked up a decent portion of my life spending almost 15,000 hours on a video game that I don't want to play. But luckily real life hasn't been looking too bad for the last little while, and hopefully I can escape from this life here. And I guess that's all I can be bothered saying for now. There are probably quite a few other topics that I probably forgot, but I'm not sure if I can be bothered expressing them. I'm not going. I've sworn off arguing about RuneScape on the internet anymore because it's not worth the effort. If you don't agree with anything I've said, go ahead. I don't care. I just wanted to get this sort of stuff out rather than ranting about it to myself in my free time. And there's quite a bit more personal stuff I'd probably like to get out, but I just don't think it's worth it. I've purposefully avoided using names in this video. I think one or two might have slipped through, but I don't think I've talked about anybody in a discouraging way. No matter how much I'd love to, might do that one day, because there are just quite a few things remaining that I'd like to do that I never got around to. I'd like to upload all of my screenshots somewhere one day, because there's a shitload of them, and I think they tell a pretty interesting story about my account and my experience with the game. I actually had about 56, I think it was about 56, 57 episodes of a series where I was going to go through every single update that came to old school RuneScape, and complain about them. And I was going to release the videos, once a day or once every 2 days, and it would have gotten. The whole idea behind it was I thought it would be kind of funny to upload a video a day for 4 months or something. But they just started to feel a bit repetitive and a bit boring. I don't have the sort of charisma required to carry it when the content itself doesn't prompt too much, which is basically why I'm going to stop here, because I've gone through most of the prompts that I'd written down for myself, and I've been talking long enough. I just want to leave everyone with a message to make sure that you enjoy your life outside of RuneScape, and to keep in mind that efficiency should be contained to how you spend your time in the game rather than how much of your life you shape around the game.